Imagine you're standing in front of a grill. There's a fresh cut of meat right in front of you. It looks perfect. It smells incredible. You cook it, sit down, and take a bite. Nothing unusual. But now ask yourself a strangely simple question. Why is that meat from a cow and not a lion? Why don't we normally eat wolves? Why not tigers? Why not bears? Humans hunt animals. We eat animals. We've done it for hundreds of thousands of years. So why did humans mostly choose animals like cows, deer, sheep, pigs, and chickens instead of the predators sitting at the top of the food chain? Most people would say because predators are dangerous. And that's true. But it doesn't completely answer the question, because there's a difference between not wanting to hunt an animal and not wanting to eat it. Technically, humans can eat lion meat. Lion meat isn't automatically poisonous just because it comes from a lion. Humans have eaten bear, alligator, shark, and other predators in different cultures. So why didn't eating predators become a normal part of human cuisine? The answer begins with one of nature's most important rules: the food chain. Imagine a blade of grass. It captures energy from the sun. A deer eats the grass. Then a lion eats the deer. But here's the problem. When energy moves from one level of the food chain to the next, most of it is lost through metabolism, movement, breathing, body heat, and other biological processes. Ecologists often use the 10% rule as a rough illustration of this. Only a fraction of the energy stored at one trophic level becomes available to the next. That's why ecosystems can support enormous amounts of plants, fewer herbivores, and even fewer apex predators. Now imagine you're a prehistoric human. You're hungry. You have two choices. You could hunt a deer, or you could risk your life trying to kill the wolf chasing that deer. Which makes more sense? The deer. It's easier to find, generally safer to hunt, and represents an efficient way to obtain calories. The wolf, meanwhile, is dangerous, difficult to kill, and has already obtained its energy by eating other animals. So from a survival perspective, hunting the predator is usually a terrible deal. But energy isn't the only problem. Something much more invisible can accumulate at the top of the food chain: biomagnification. It's called biomagnification. Imagine pollutants entering an ecosystem. Tiny organisms absorb small amounts. Small fish eat thousands of those organisms. Larger fish eat the small fish. Then a top predator eats hundreds or thousands of those larger animals. Certain persistent chemicals can become increasingly concentrated as they move through the food web. One famous example involved DDT. In the 20th century, DDT was widely used as a pesticide. It entered ecosystems and accumulated through food chains. Birds of prey could receive significant exposure by eating contaminated animals. The result was devastating for some populations, including bald eagles. DDT contributed to eggshell thinning, making eggs more likely to break before the chicks could hatch. The important lesson is simple. Sometimes the danger isn't in what an animal eats once, it's in everything that animal has eaten over its lifetime. And large predators eat a lot. A lion may consume enormous quantities of prey. A shark may eat countless fish. A wolf may consume hundreds of animals throughout its life. That doesn't mean every predator is toxic. It means animals high on the food chain can have greater exposure to certain contaminants. And then there's an even more immediate problem: parasites. Predators eat meat. Wild predators may eat it raw, and wild carnivores can carry parasites and pathogens that humans don't want anywhere near their food. One famous example is Trichinella. Certain Trichinella parasites can live in animal muscle tissue. Humans can become infected by eating contaminated, undercooked meat. The resulting illness, trichinellosis, can cause fever, muscle pain, swelling, and other serious symptoms. Bear meat is a particularly well-known source of Trichinella infections. That's why properly cooking wild game isn't simply about taste. It can literally be the difference between a meal and a medical emergency. So predators aren't inherently poisonous, but wild carnivores can come with a complicated biological package: parasites, bacteria, pathogens, and environmental contaminants. And then we reach the strangest part. Even if you could guarantee that the meat was completely safe, you might still feel uncomfortable eating it. Why does eating a predator feel wrong? Imagine two plates. On one is a perfectly cooked steak from a cow. On the other is a perfectly cooked steak from a wolf. Both are meat, both contain protein, both can be cooked, but most people would react very differently. The wolf steak feels wrong. Part of that reaction is cultural. What humans consider food varies enormously around the world. But humans also have a powerful biological defense system called disgust. Disgust helps us avoid things associated with disease and contamination. Rotten food, spoiled meat, parasites, bodily fluids, and potentially dangerous sources of infection. Evolution didn't give humans a perfect database telling us exactly which animal is safe to eat. Instead, it gave us systems that help us make quick decisions when information is incomplete. And that matters because our ancestors didn't have microscopes. They couldn't test meat for parasites. They couldn't measure mercury. They couldn't identify bacteria. They couldn't run chemical analysis on a carcass. They had observation, experience, culture, and instinct. If certain foods repeatedly caused illness, avoiding them could become extremely valuable. But here's an important point. Your disgust isn't literally an inherited memory of your ancestors getting sick. Evolution doesn't work like that. Instead, humans can inherit behavioural tendencies that make us more sensitive to potential sources of disease. Culture then teaches us what those feelings should be attached to. That's why something can feel disgusting even when you can't explain exactly why. But humans do eat predators, and this is where the story gets interesting. Humans have eaten bear. Some cultures eat shark. People eat alligator. Humans consume predatory fish. So the rule isn't never eat predators. The real pattern is much more complicated. Risk depends on the species, its diet, its environment, its age, parasites, contaminants, and how the meat is handled and cooked. Some predators can be eaten safely when properly prepared. Others can present much greater risks. So why don't lions, tigers, and wolves dominate human cuisine? Because humans don't need them. Think about the ancient hunter again. A deer gives you meat. A lion gives you meat too. But one can potentially kill you. The other is standing around eating grass. The choice becomes obvious. And eventually humans took this idea even further. We domesticated animals. Cows, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens. Instead of risking your life hunting a dangerous predator every time you needed food, you could raise animals near your settlement, feed them, protect them, and have a predictable source of calories and protein. That changed human history. Our food system wasn't built around the animals that were the strongest. It was built around animals that were useful, manageable, abundant, and relatively safe. So, why don't we eat lions? There isn't one single answer. It's a combination of biology, ecology, evolution, and culture. Predators are dangerous to hunt. They're usually less abundant than their prey. They can carry parasites and pathogens. Some contaminants can become concentrated in food webs, and humans have powerful psychological systems that influence what we consider safe or disgusting. So the lion isn't sitting outside your kitchen because nature put a sign on it saying, "Do not eat." It's there because, for most of human history, there were simply better options. Your ancestors didn't know the term food chain. They didn't understand biomagnification. They didn't know what Trichinella was. They couldn't measure mercury, but they were constantly answering one question: what can we eat without getting killed or getting sick? And generation after generation, humans became incredibly good at finding the answer. So the next time you look at a steak, chicken, or piece of fish, remember what you're actually looking at. It's not just food. It's the result of millions of years of survival, ecology, evolution, and human decision making. And somewhere at the top of the food chain, the lion is still there. Not because humans physically can't eat it, not because lion meat is magically poisonous, but because the predator is dangerous to hunt, potentially carries biological risks, and offers little reason to choose it when safer, easier food exists. So maybe the real question isn't, why don't humans eat lions? Maybe it's, how did humans become so good at knowing what not to eat, long before we understood why? Because sometimes, survival doesn't arrive as a scientific fact. Sometimes, it arrives as a feeling. And that feeling may be the reason you look at a cow and think, dinner, but look at a lion and think, absolutely not.